Okay, so hello everybody, welcome back to another guide. This is a very exciting one as this is now going to be a guide about my main deck. So this is the deck that I primarily play, or at least played in the Japanese meta, and so I am happy to bring to you this meta deck that will most likely terrorize the current format. So my name is Carryion, a lot of you are going to know me as Alex. And this is Haven's guide for Yellow Mina Ashiro and how they finally broke yellow in Union Arena. So, alrighty. So a couple things to expect here. We're going to go over some context, a little bit different from the last guide, just so I can get a couple things off my chest about this. Second, we're going to go over pros and cons, pretty classic. We're going to go over some deck lists, both the generic deck lists and my own. We'll go over card considerations as well, although frankly, there's not really much to consider, and we'll talk about this a little bit later. And lastly, and of course, again, the bread and butter is the matchups and win conditions for every deck in the meta or every deck that is upcoming for the meta. And then lastly is the additional info section where we're going to talk about, a couple little key pieces here and there, pertinent to the deck, but also might be more generally pertinent to anyone else playing the game. So a little bit of context. This is actually very exciting because this is the first two-color set that the West is seeing, and we are expecting a couple future sets in the as well that will be two-color sets. And two-color sets are really exciting because they finally get to compress all of the Volume 1 and Volume 2 power into one set. And so what that does is right out the box, these two-color sets are basically strong enough to contend with meta decks that have existed for a long while. So for example, Bleach, we now have Volume 1, Volume 2, and the binder, the premium binder. Code Geass, we have Volume 1 and Volume 2. JJK has Volume 1, Volume 2, so on and so forth. Two color sets are just removing one color but compressing all of that third color's power into the two colors to focus on, and that leads to a lot of power scaling. We're going to see a lot of decks that are much stronger than most other decks would be right out the gate. And also a bit of a playstyle shift because two color sets are sort of unique in that they have more broad playable SRs and more interesting playstyles to kind of toy with within the same color. We'll go over this a little bit later in the future, but that's some context here. And I would expect leading up to the now remade December regionals for Union Arena, we'll see a lot of toying around with what kind of yellow decks are strong, what kind of green decks are strong, because those are the only two in Kaiju. But yeah, let's move on. So first off, for Yellow Mina Ashiro, some pros. This is a aggressive. Well, I don't want to say aggressive. This is a very high pressure control deck that kind of takes advantage of the fact that yellow is objectively, by the way, the best color trigger in the game. And no, it's not any argument or debate. It is just objectively the best color trigger in the game. There is so much strength in being able to just sleep a target unconditionally out of trigger. We finally have a way to abuse that. Secondly, it comes with a backline attacker. Historically, backline attackers have always been very good if you just look at the Japanese meta, but also if you look at the English meta, right? Like Saito, I think is it might be the only backline attacker. I could be wrong. I don't quite remember off the top of my head, but Saito has been considered strong as a backline attacker. I put that in quotations because I don't think it's personally strong, but it comes with a very strong backline attacker that is a double energy generator. Line manipulation, you'll see a lot of these cards where raids are not the only way to move cards in between lines, and that becomes very, very strong in certain scenarios. Cheating Bodies, actually one of the raids in this set, is what I consider to be the best card in the set, purely off an efficiency standpoint, and you will see that Kaiju Yellow as a whole has a lot of body cheats and AP efficiency. And lastly, the deck comes with an excellent, excellent suite of draw. We have draw from our 0 cost, we have draw from our 1 cost, we have draw from our 2 cost, we have draw from our 4 cost, we have draw from, like, essentially everything. So we're basically just playing through our deck at an extremely rapid rate. So some cons here, and there's not very many you'll notice, and that's why I think it's the BDIF. Number one, there's a lot of importance on sequencing. You have to figure out exactly what pieces have to be played in what order. And even though like people, joke on Union Arena saying like it's a 3-action game, it can't be that complicated. There are some little things here and there where you have to optimize your sequences to make sure that you are accounting for every possibility. Whether it's, a special off life or they punch you into a raid trigger off life, you have to really figure that out in this deck. Secondly, there's no natural 5k bodies, which sounds like it would be a death sentence in most cases in the current meta, but we'll talk about why that's not the case here. And lastly, some decklist confusion. Like I mentioned previously, because you have basically 2 volumes compressed into one set, a lot of people get a little bit confused on how they're supposed to build Kaiju decks, because you just have so many more SRs that are all very playable, by the way. This is probably the only set where, like, I think every SR is playable to some extent, which is crazy. But that, like, overload of options and opportunities becomes very confusing for some people. So we're going to walk through that and kind of figure out, what is optimal for yellow. Okay, so what we see on the screen right now is the base deck list for Mina Ashiro, and I call this the base list because there are some changes you can make to preference, and purely because of how big Kaiju's set is for each individual color, a lot of times you're going to see some weird deck lists where people will like make a lot of changes to the space deck list because you have so many opportunities. Okay, so we start off with our 12 0 costs. Very straightforward. We have our vanilla 15 raid targets, vanilla 2k raid target, and then we have our draw 1, pitch 1 0 cost. Now, the nice thing about this is all of these cards are raid targets for zeros, which means your zeros are never like necessarily useless. You'll see that this list also plays 4 1s, so it creates a 16 zeros and 1s. That is, like I've mentioned before, the bare minimum to play the game. I personally prefer more, and we'll talk about how I supplement the deck list going forward. We played the 1 cost Mina Searcher, and the Searcher specifically only looks for Mina and Bako. You might be wondering why we're playing such a selective Searcher in this deck, and it really boils down to 2 things. Number 1, Mina is actually all that really matters, and everything else is a supplement. And 2, Bako is one of the best support cards, I think, in the game. And it's kind of weird to say that because it really is just like a 4k body with protection and the other one's an energy generator. But you'll see how some certain combinations are just really, really strong off of the 3 cost Bako. Moving on, we have the 2 cost Soshiro Hoshina, who, if it's on the front line, you activate main, tap it down, you can sleep an opponent. Now, a little bit unique here, and I think Nobara is also the equivalent of Hoshino in yellow for JJK. This is a 2 cost that actually selects the opponent's frontline unit to rest. It's a little bit unique because a lot of the times what they do to balance this is that they will say your opponent gets the opportunity to choose a unit to rest. So we actually get to choose what to rest, which gives a lot of strength to compete against 5k bodies. We can just choose the 5ks to rest, and we can just go through them no problem. The 3 costs are where this deck really shines. We have the Mina and the Bako 3 costs, both of which are double energy generators, but they also synergize well because whenever Mina is played on the same line as a Bako, you can also choose another character in your opponent's front line to rest. Not only that, Bako, when played, lets you push a unit from your one character on one line to the other line, which means you are not punished on the 3 curve for playing aggressively because you can just play the Bako and push on the 3 curve, and at worst you will have 2 energy, which is actually quite rare. I actually don't think there is an equivalent right now in the current meta. I could be wrong. And then what I consider the best card in the deck and in this entire set, we have the 3-cost Reno Ichikawa. During your turn, if another card has a 3-cost in the front line, this character gains 500 BP, so it's a 4K effectively. But most importantly, you get to body cheat a 3-cost 1 AP character from your hand onto the field. Why is it the best? It's because this card individually, while it may not seem strong, actually cheats out some of the best cards in the game. Remember how I talked about Bako and Mina? Well, he gets to cheat them out. And by cheating them out, he gets to trigger effects, which trigger other effects, which trigger bodies moving up to the front line, and you just create this large chain of combinations that no other deck in the meta has seen or is able to use in an effective way. So that's why I think it's the best card in the deck. Moving to the 4-cost, we have the 4-1 Bako, which offers a little bit of protection for Mina Ashiro, and it's also a 4K. We have our backline attacker Mina, 4-2. You get to play active, and it gets to swing when played from the backline. That alone is very, very strong, by the way, being able to go like 5 wide without having a double attacker. But then it's also a double energy generator, and once per turn, activate main, you can give another character on your field plus 1k. That's actually really, really strong, because more often than not, you want a Bako in the front line and a Bako in the back line. The Bako in the front line is usually going to be your 4k Bako, but if in a pinch you have to use the 3k Bako, this Mina will bump it to a 4k. And the reason you want Bako on front and back line is because this Mina, when it attacks and there's a Bako on the same energy or on the same line as it, it gets a draw. The other Mina gets impact. Speaking of the other Mina, we have the 5-cost Mina, where if there is a Bako on the same line, it gains impact. When played, choose a character on your opponent's front line instead of resting. And this is why I call this the Sleep Luck deck. This Mina keeps resting units resting for the opponent's turn up until your next turn. So next time it will be switched to active, keep it resting. This is an activate main ability, which means you can, on command, keep cards locked down. That is ridiculously strong, and it is one of the only reasons why Yellow was never so oppressive, is that we never had a way to abuse sleep under our control, right? It was always a matter of, we're going to set this to resting, but if you hit a trigger, sucks for us. Or we're going to try and set a unit to resting, you get to choose, right? We now have the control to say, I'm putting this to rest and I'm keeping it rested. What are you going to do about it, right? Much harder to deal with. And we kind of skipped over this, but Hoshina 4-cost here is simply, when played, draw a card. It is a 4K, but it also can't be blocked by 3K, which kind of synergizes very well with like forced sleep, because I can just force sleep all the 5K bodies, and now it's just going through everything unless you block with a 4K. That's very difficult. The final and special are not anything to talk about really. It's very straightforward, just the typical 3K, 5K pop. So that's the base deck list. Now, my list is a little bit different. We are playing 12 zeros again, or sorry, 11 zeros this time. We're dropping 1 Mina. In return, we are playing 6 1-costs. We are playing the 1-cost Reno, which is the same ability of draw 1, discard 1. And we're playing 3 of the Mina Ashiro Searcher. I dropped the Searcher counts because I feel like there are less Minas and Bakos in the deck for your search to be as effective. I would much rather have the opportunity to draw 1, discard 1, than look at the top 4 for search and just end up inevitably not finding something, right? So this also means you have 17 zeros and ones, which I personally prefer as like the sweet spot number for not bricking. The deck actually doesn't have any new cards in it outside of that Reno. It's just slightly different ratios here. So you'll notice we have 7 raid targets for Reno and Soshiro, and we also have a good handful of raid targets for Mina, but fewer than before. We actually lose 2 raid targets. What I was hoping with this deck list is that we get a more consistent playable game because I genuinely believe that this is the deck that embodies, if I'm playing the game, I'm winning as like the play style. And that seems like a lot of praise for this deck, but I think what they did, or what Bandai did and Union Arena did with this deck, is they really designed it to the point where every action truly feels efficient, which also means if you don't know how to play this deck, you are losing efficiency to the point of just being punished. So you really have to know how to play this deck. A lot of people will joke about it, saying like it's C card, play card, just do what you need to do. I would argue that this deck is a little higher on the difficulty scale and a little higher on the skill ceiling. So yeah, that is my version of the deck list. So this is the only card consideration we have to talk about, and the reason for that is because I have actually considered playing this myself, and I have seen it tested, and me and some other friends have tested this card. The card consideration here is now it's time for me to shoot my foe. What this does is it gives you, or it gives a Mina Ashiro on your field 2 KBP, and the character can now attack from the energy line until the end of turn. So what does this do? It gives you an out to backline attacker. It means any Mina above 2k is a 4k swing, and that guarantees you 5 swings that turn. Very good. Secondly, 2k BP increase means every Mina Ashiro is a threat. The only caveat here is a 0-cost Mina, but that's almost always a raid target. And then lastly, this card gives you an active trigger, which in the case of this deck is not necessarily the biggest benefit, but it can be a saving grace at times. The downside here is that AP usage is somewhat inefficient. Remember how I said that like they designed this deck to be as efficient as possible? This kind of takes that down a notch. And normally I wouldn't be opposed to making it slightly less efficient, but I just don't like playing this card ever. And sometimes it can just completely break your hand because it's a 4-cost card. Like, this is an expensive event, right? So if you're playing like even 2 of these and you happen to start with it in your starting hand, I'm sorry to tell you, you're never playing the game. Like, this is so hard to play. So just for that alone, I'd rather just not play this card. But I have some people tech 2 in. Also, side note for anyone watching, please, for the love of God, do not play 1-ofs. I feel like 1-ofs are so useless in this game. Playing 1-ofs is basically just praying for top deck. And if you're praying for top deck, you're not making it very far in a long-term regional. So don't do that. That's my side caveat. Don't play 1-of of this card. At least play 2 if you're going to tech it. Okay. Enough preamble yapping. This is going to be the main focus. We're going to be looking at the matchups based on the current meta decks, or what I consider to be the current meta decks, specifically Tier 1 and like Tier 1.5. And then any of the new additions that we have seen. So this is going to be also including Yu Yu Hakusho decks. We'll talk about that. And other Kaiju number 8 decks. And to start, everyone's favorite, the Meta King, Red Kenshin Kaoru. This is a deck that is extremely aggressive. They're going to go right out the gate and try and punch you down, so you're going to use this to your advantage. Feel free to just toss blockers in the front. Don't do it to like ruin your energy line, but just make sure that like you're okay to block with chump blockers and just push back the energy line. Even like drop your double energies in the front, because then when they swing, you'll just push to the energy line. Use their forced rest effect on double attack Kenshin. Very, very, very clean. Just being able to prevent double attack. And special triggers you can then use on the impact Kenshin, or a second double attack Kenshin, or the other 2 AP Kenshin. Like, Sleep gives you so much power because it lets you focus your special elsewhere. And I think in this deck in particular, it really shines. This deck is very offense heavy and has very little removal. In fact, it only has 4 specials and no other removal. So it's really difficult for them to respond to you if you choose to play aggressively. So if you want to, what you can do is just like really push hard. If you have all your 4Ks on the board, just go like Hoshina raid, push my Mina 4-2 up, raid Mina, raid Reno, and just punch. They're not going to have an answer. If they do, they're only clearing one of your options. There's no way they clear your full front line. So very good to just aggro. And speaking of Hoshina, Hoshina can bypass a lot of the early game chump blockers. They usually will do like they'll just throw in like body blocks, like small body blocks, until they can put like their 3-1 aggro Kenshin or raid Kenshin and push something back, raid Kenshin double attack, right? Like Hoshina can kind of stay there and be a really annoying aggressor that chip damages, and they have to block with their 4Ks. And this is a deck that does not have 5K bodies, so it's very, very useful. Okay, Purple Saito. Like I said, a deck that is tier 1.5. I personally don't like it. A lot of people do, so we're going to talk about it. This deck loses momentum very quickly. If you can outlast them, in my opinion, for more than 4 turns, it's really hard for them to even like play the game. And I say this because there's so much discarding and like so much, there's so much to play and so little to draw back. You can cheat plenty of bodies on the board, so like make sure to play your Reno as aggressively as possible. Use your Bako aggressively, slam it in the energy line, push a chump body, and just chip, 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 chip. And the chip damage will end up becoming really impactful later on. You're going to force rest the 6-cost Hajime, obviously. But there are certain cases where you're okay with force resting the 4-1 Hajime. Or, like, I guess in theory, you could force rest, like, any of the chump blockers just to get extra chip damage in early game. But you want to be using most of your removal on 6-cost Hajime Saito. You don't want impact to stay on the board. Okay, the deck does have a backline attacker, so the 6-cost Hajime essentially acts as a backline attacker, just moves to the front when it swings. But you always want to make sure, as is the case with all snipe decks, that you'll have multiple frontline threats, so they can't figure out like what's the best way to, or what the best unit to kill is. They're gonna knock out your Mina. That's kind of inevitable. It's fine. Let them knock it out. You're going to have Hoshina still on the board. You're going to still have probably your 4-2 Mina that you can push to the front to also swing. It won't matter. And then lastly, like, you have a massive drop pool, and these guys are going to lose momentum very quickly because they go through their deck very quickly. You're always going to have more options than they do, so it's always better to play safe. Don't play for the hyper-aggressive play. Play for the line that gives you the highest chance of winning in the long term. Because you're almost always going to have it unless they egregiously sack you. But if that's the case, like, whatever, take the game, right? Third deck is our most recent regional winner, Blue Mustang and Hawkeye. Right now, multi-removal is like what we consider the tier 1 standard. Any deck that has more than the 4 removals is like a tier 1 deck. And Mustang is by far the most removals probably in the meta, outside of like the new Yu Yu Hakusho decks. So I don't like giving this advice because you can cheat out multiple bodies and it's kind of useful for chip damage, but in this matchup the small bodies get cleared by Roy Mustang really, really quickly. So more often than not you want to use your body cheat for energy and less about chump blocks. If you happen to get the Bako, then please like just push up a small body and just like punch, right? If anything, they just waste a card or two on clearing it, but you just want to focus on getting a really nice mid-game curve, because once you hit the end game, you almost always win, in my opinion. And the reason for that, we're going to talk about the next point, is forced rest. Really, really, really broken here, actually. You can force rest the Mustang and then special the Hawkeye, and then that removes all of their utility on the board, and it's so depressing being on the other side of that. You could also rest a Mustang and knock out another Mustang, and it's like, okay, you now just lost half of your offensive pressure. What are you going to do about it? And this deck, like, quite literally hemorrhages its hand, because that's the whole point of it. Your insane draw power ends up, like, out-resourcing them at the end of the day. So don't discard your draw power. You're going to eventually, long-term, win the game anyways. The 4-cost Bako here, the one that protects Mina, is really, really good. It just forces the opponent to throw away an extra card. So if they want to Hawkeye effect, they'll discard one. If they want a Mustang effect, they have to discard another one. So if they really want to be efficient, it becomes kind of difficult for them. Green Lancelot, so this was the previous king of the meta, and sort of like what I consider the gatekeeper of sorry about that. This is like the gatekeeper of tier 1. And the standard for ramp decks has changed a little bit, but this has become like the golden standard, where it has a good amount of removal. It has big bodies and not that many offensive options. It's just like a two-trick pony. You're gonna cheat bodies, and cheating bodies here is really, really good because, again, it's a ramp deck. You can almost always get some chip damage on them because they're too busy ramping up. You can force rest Lancelot Air Cavalry if you want to get through the 5k, but I actually recommend usually force resting the 6 cost Lancelot, especially if they have it raided, because then you prevent them from actually getting their when sidelined raid trigger back. But, you know, it's very situational in here, and it really doesn't matter as long as you kill one of the Lancelots, because they don't have very many aggressive options after the fact. 2-cost Hoshina here is actually like really broken. You can just like keep it on the front line, rest the 8-cost Lancelot every turn, and like even if you don't force sleep it, which you almost always will, but even if you don't, you're just like, you're laughing at the fact that they'll never have a 5k blocker, and you have a 3k that is doing their job for it. So it's really, really funny. 4-cost Bako here, again, very good. Deters them from targeting Mina. Otherwise, they have to discard a card from hand. And honestly, with this deck, like, there's a lot of cases where you want to keep cards in hand. You're probably holding on to like 2 raids for like an end game, like big double raid play. So reducing your hand just becomes really, really annoying. Purple Renji Rush version 2. Very simple, straightforward deck, as I've always said. They tend to use when played effects a lot to try and overpower the opponent and reduce their BP. Make sure that when you're against the Renji Rush, and this is like a generic tip, always keep track of their discard. You know, 5-cost Ichigo's ability is very dependent on how many cards are in discard. But also, like, just keep in mind how many finals and specials they have, because that kind of dictates their pace of play. Force Rest here is like, it's good against every target, frankly. You're probably going to use it against the damage to Renji, but like, there's no wrong answer here. You just want to rest the raids. Because if they block with the raids, it takes 2 cards into the discard, which is double the fodder for 5-cost Ichigo, than if they were to just block with 1 card. Opponents also don't have 5k bodies here, but they do tend to flood the board a lot, so Hoshina is just really good to bypass the small chump blockers, and then you can just like force them into awkward checkmates later. And then again, 4-cost Bako, very, very good. Every card in this deck targets a character, or almost every card, so Mina's annoying to remove for them. The more the merrier, right? The more resources they use, the merrier. Okay, so that goes over all the decks that we previously had that we considered Tier 1, Tier 1.5. If I haven't included a deck that you guys think are Tier 1 or Tier 1.5, don't think that's the end-all be-all. I just don't personally hold them in very high regard for one reason or another. Feel free to disagree with me on that. Put that in the comments, whether or not you think I'm wrong for that one. But I just don't think any other deck holds a candle to those 5. 4? 5? I don't remember how many we went through now. So now we're going into the new cards, or the new decks, and we're going to start off with Yu Yu Hakusho. I'm using the incorrect younger Toguro card in the front here, because Experts at the time of me making these slides did not have the 8-cost Toguro card, so forgive me, but different Toguro, obviously. This is essentially the start also of when we see newer IPs just eclipsing older IPs in one way or another, basically. So a lot of these future decks, I'm going to tell you like what they imitate, but they just do better. Toguro is, for all intents and purposes, just a harder hitting Lancelot. It is impact 1 damage 3, and it also pops a body on raid. So who does that remind you of, right? The deck focuses a lot on the elder Toguro reducing the cost of younger Toguro, though, so it's a lot more energy efficient. And part of this deck is about looping elder Toguro constantly and just making all of your other younger Toguros cheap. Doing this, however, requires them to discard cards from hand, so they eventually start losing resources really, really quickly. And you might have noticed this, but draw 1, discard 1 actually is really annoying sometimes when you don't have anything in hand to discard. So Forced Rest, you have to use it on the 8-cost younger Toguro. If you don't, you're just giving them an opportunity to end the game. You can't take damage 3. It's not like Lancelot where damage 2, like you just pray, you hit a trigger, right? Damage 3 is quite literally 2 of those ends the game for you, potentially. You can't let even one of those hit. It's also a 5k body, so you have to find a way to circumvent that. And the best way, in my opinion, into dealing with this deck is to just go with fast, cheap bodies, aggro low, get your Hoshina out there early, and just put them into situations where they have to be like, oh crap, I only have 4 cards in hand, I don't have anything to discard. And if you get them into a resource war, you're almost always winning, because you have way more cards in your hand, way more draw, way more filter. Oh dear. The next deck that came out is Red Hiei Yukina. This is effectively an Esper Sisters deck. It's an event recursion deck, but even better because it's an event-based spam deck that has the most amount of removal in the entire game. You have 4 specials. You have mini specials with, what's it called? Sword of the Darkness Flame, which basically pops smaller bodies. You have the color trigger, which also pops smaller bodies. And you have Hiei, who can recursively use specials from your sideline. So, what is that? Like 4 colors, 4 specials, 4 mini specials, 4 Hieis. You're looking at 16 pops. That's disgusting. Now, the caveat here is that the deck itself does not run very many character cards, and very few of them are very strong. So, take with that what you will. Forced rest here is very, very situational, I found. You can choose to rest the when attacking Hiei, and that's like kind of helpful just to, prevent them from triggering that ability. The impact Hiei if you're about to lose the game. You can also rest the nullify impact Yusuke if you're like going to end the game with impact. Cheating the multiple smaller bodies can be useful in the early game to aggressively chip damage. And the deck does not have very many triggers. I think it's like sub 40. It might be like 36, 32. I don't even remember. Like very few triggers. So just go aggressive. But just keep in mind that if they happen to luck out and hit a color trigger, you're going to be pretty sad because then 15 other clears are going to probably wipe your board. Lastly, 4-cost Bako. You have to play this. You have to have it on the board. If you don't have it on the board, you're actively losing the game. Do not discard it because every board clear effect is targeted in this deck, and you need this because of how many targeted specials there are in this deck. You can potentially just like do 1 4-cost Bako and 2 Chump Mina and the 1 Raid Mina, and honestly that'd be incredible because every single one of their events suddenly just is like, oh, okay, discard another card from hand. Oh, discard a 3rd card from hand. It becomes very difficult. And the last notable deck from Yu Yu Hakusho is Green Yusuke Kenma, or Konma. I don't even know how to pronounce it. Someone tell me how to pronounce that. This is effectively the better version of Green Kurapika. Hilariously, every archetype from Yu Yu Hakusho has just been better versions of existing types. Oh, sorry. So this is Green Kurapika with a better low-end energy generation. You ramp a lot faster in this deck. You have multi-faceted abilities, and the Kunma actually lets you choose multiple. So, like, you're effectively just playing all of the choose one of the followings. Forced rest here, you just need to sleep Yusuke. It has a 1 attacking, and you just need to stop it. That's not that hard. Sleep every Yusuke, target the 7 cost in particular. As is the case with most ramp decks, though, cheating small bodies is almost always a good way to just get like really quick chip and then end the game with an impact 1. And kind of similar to Red Hiei, there aren't very many triggers in this deck, so if you swing aggressively, you'll probably get away with like a lot of greedy play. I know that's like kind of counterintuitive to say because I've always been I've been an advocate of if you play safe with Yellow Mina Ashiro, you're probably winning. But in this case, feel free to just abuse the fact that they have no triggers. And now we're going to go into Kaiju. One thing that I'm going to preface this with is Kaiju might be the only set where within itself, every matchup is relatively balanced. which means rare battles will be really fun, but that's, besides the point. The reason I say that is because, again, it's a 2-color set, which means a lot of the decks are like very, very similar in terms of like build, but also like they were all designed to be very AP efficient. I'm not sure why that's the case. You'll see that like all of the kaiju decks do what they do very well. And so it creates this kind of like triangle meta where kaiju beats kaiju, or kaiju 1 beats kaiju 2, kaiju 2 beats kaiju 3, kaiju 3 can beat kaiju 1. So just keep that in mind. Yellow Kikoto Reno is a very low-end aggro rush deck that focuses primarily on 3-cost characters and buffing them all to be 3-cost but 4k or higher. And this deck is a monster for body cheating. You have the 3-cost Reno Raid. You have the 3-cost, what's his name? Kafka Hibino. You have the 3-cost Kikoru, where if you cheat it out, you restand the AP. So you don't even need finals. The deck doesn't run final because you don't need final. You have the Kikoru to restand, right? And so you're just, for lack of a better term, shitting out bodies constantly. The caveat is that there's very few removals in the deck. So they're trying to win the game early, and they're trying to make sure you can't keep pace. If you raid early against this deck, though, you can swing the board into your favor pretty quickly. And they don't really have a good way to punish it. You're going to force rest a Kikoto every time. It is the only card, I think, that might be wrong, but it is one of the best cards in the deck to sleep just because it has a when attacking, and it's a very impactful when attacking. Reno, there's no point in sleeping Reno, honestly. It's just a vanilla at that point. And then, like, honestly, the 3-cost Reno when attacking is also a decent sleep target, but, like, when is that ever more threatening than 5k impact draw card, right? So, the deck is faster than you almost always when it comes to overwhelming with speed and bodies. Like, I know Yellow Mina Ashiro is very good at cheating bodies because it also plays the Reno, but this one is just like too fast. So instead of focusing on playing instead of focusing on body cheat, really try and focus on controlling the board state. Use your resources sparingly, figure out exactly what it is that you can and can't do per turn, and appropriately apply board control. What I mean by that is really think about whether or not you have to use resources. Do you need to special the Kikoru? Or are you okay to just sleep it this turn? Do you need to play this 4-2 or the 4-cost 2 AP Mina in the back for 5 swings? Or could you just pop 2 bodies out and really set up your future turn? You need to really think about that in this matchup. Lastly, focus on getting a Bako on each line. It enables 3-cost Minas sleep in the back. It enables impact and draw on both of the 4-cost and 5-cost Minas in the front. And that is, at the end of the day, what is going to win you the game, is the fact that you can impact and draw, while their Kikoru, while it has impact and draw, is staying asleep, right? So you're always going to come out with the advantage. The next deck we're going to talk about is Green Hoshina and Kafka. So this is specifically like a Hoshina deck, and Hoshina is a multi-attack deck where you focus on resting characters to give double attack, and then those characters can restand themselves. The deck runs an insane amount of draw and really good effects where it's kind of self-sufficient. By that I mean, like, it has a cost that has its own way of mitigating the cost. Like Kafka, for example, rest it, draw a card, discard a card from hand to restand it with 500 more BP. So, like, at net 0 cost, you're making it a 4K. I don't know why they, like, designed it that way, but that's apparently how they're going to go with Kaiju in this scenario. And that happens to be the case with, like, all of Kafka's cards. So, fairly self-sufficient. But the nice thing with this matchup is, like, you can force rest basically anything in this matchup, because everything wants to go from active to resting to active. So a majority of these effects require the character to be set to resting from active. So if you sleep a target, their bonus can't be triggered. This is the case with the 4-cost Mina. Any card that like was set from active to resting this turn, you can set it to active. That it blocks that completely. The 3-cost Hoshina, where if it was set from active to resting this turn, set it back to active. Like if you sleep those cards, they can't be set to active again, so it's actually really helpful. And this deck does swing wide, don't get me wrong, because it has double attackers, and if there's 2 of them, it's 6 swings. But you have a 4/2 Mina, so you can also go 5 swings. And rather than try and play defensively against multi-swings, which is like typically what the case was, you can just go and play aggressive and just try and take smaller advantages here and there, like some chip damage here, an impact there, trade 2 bodies for 1 here and there. Like eventually you will find outs that will scale off of you better than it will for them. And now we look at the other Green Kaiju deck here, Kaiju number 8. It's a ramp deck that, like, I don't even want to call it a ramp deck. I don't know how to call this one. It's like a mid to late game deck that benefits from constant rest effects, kind of similar to Hoshina. It's slower, it's more sequence heavy, and as a result, a little harder to play. It's a green deck that, like, doesn't play like green, if that makes sense. It almost feels like it should be a blue deck. The complexity behind it creates a lot of misplays from your opponent. Like, I've seen a lot of cases where people sleep their own units incorrectly in Kaiju number 8, or like they'll discard cards the wrong way, or like they'll discard a card now that they need for the future. It's actually a little more complicated than I thought it was going to be. If you, as the Mina Ashiro player, are behind on life, you're almost always sleeping the 6-cost Kaiju, because that's the one that has impact. And then you can just like chump block the damage 2. But if you're ahead, denying damage 2 is really nice, because like damage 2 is the only way they catch up to you in the life totals. Impact is just like whatever, you can take an impact a turn. I'm just going to clear your board and impact you back, right? You can also sleep the 8-cost Kaiju if the 5k body proves to be a problem, which usually is not the case. You're normally just going to pop it, or like, I guess, just circumvent it somehow because you have 5 swings. But again, like, feel free to rest it. My personal opinion, I'm pretty sure this deck is actually like worse than Green Hoshina, but again, I'm like not certain. It's a really clunky deck, but it, I guess, does what it does well. I don't know. It's probably better than like all of the Hakusho decks, but even that's kind of iffy. Like, I'm not sure. Little toss up. And now we get to the mirror match. I personally hate this mirror match, only because it's kind of luck dependent in a game that's already very luck dependent. Essentially, whoever draws more outs to Mina, or who draws more Mina Ashiro, will win, because you have better aggression, and you can then sleep units more effectively per turn. Alternatively, you can actually just go really low to the board aggro with Reno and Hoshina and try and just like hard aggro for the early game so that you end the game on impact. And I've seen that work, but generally it just boils down to whoever draws more Minas anyways. You want to force rest the opponent Mina Ashiro, which prevents impact, and also prevents the draw on the 4/2 Mina. Please keep in mind, they can also just activate their main onto you with their Mina, even if their Mina is rested. So it actually doesn't matter that much. 4-cost Bako, again, very, very useful here. Most sleep effects and other effects in this deck are targeted, which means they'll have to discard a card from hand. And funny enough, the tech card, Now It's Time for Me to Shoot My Foe, is actually really, really good in this matchup. It creates threat. You use a smaller Mina for it, and that smaller Mina can eventually raid into a bigger Mina, so realistically, it's actually just like really, really good. And since there is no 5k in the deck, your 1500 Minas go over everything that is not a 4k, so could eventually end up being a good threat. Before we go over the additional info, I forgot, I usually do like number ratings for like all the decks, so I'm going to go back and do that real quick. Rewind. Okay, so the Kenshin matchup, this one's like, I'm going to say 50-50. Maybe a little favored for you, actually. I lied. Maybe 55-45 for you. Purple Saito, if you know what you're doing, it's almost always 60-40. If you don't know what you're doing, or if they're just they get lucky, it's probably 50-50. Mustang is kind of tough. This one is probably the closest to 50-50 I can imagine. Green Lancelot, you body this deck. Like, I don't think I've ever seen this Yellow Mina ever lose to this. So I'm going to say, like, 70-30. Renji Rush is pretty annoying because, like, there's so many 4K bodies. Let's say 55-45. Not terrible, not great. The Toguro Brothers, I haven't seen enough of this deck played, honestly, to make a good assumption about it, but I'm going to say it's hard. It'll probably be like 55-45 in their favor for this one. Red Hiei Yukina, like, I don't know what to tell. Like, let's say 60-40 in your favor, but like super, super high variance. Like, this is just like complete toss-up matchup. It's a big RNG matchup. Green Yusuke Kunma, I'm going to say it's favored towards you because there's only really one threat you have to worry about, and you just keep that threat slept the entire time. So like 65-40-35 in your favor. Yellow Kikoru, you're probably winning most matchups unless they get the Reno combo out early. So let's go with 55-45. Hoshina Kafka, this one's a 50-50. I've tested this too many times to know that this is just straight up a 50-50, and anyone who says otherwise, like, you obviously have not played this deck enough to understand how good it is. Green Kaiju number 8. I'm pretty certain you're bodying this deck, but let's be a little conservative here because it's still early in the meta. We'll go 60-40. And lastly, Mirror Match is just literally 50-50. I'm not even going to bother talking about this one. Okay, so a little bit of additional info. This is mainly for new players who are like new to playing a control style deck, but this may or may not be helpful for the more veteran players as well. Okay, so a lot of people have given me the question of like, what is the best way to rest? And I personally think controlled forced rest is probably the most broken effect in this game. The decision boils down to, do you want to block with specific characters? Or do I want you to block with specific characters? Right? Like, if we're in any scenario where I think you want to block, I'm going to make sure you block with your big bodies. Because I want you to lose them. Right? So near the end game, I'm sleeping the small chump blockers. Near the early game, I'm probably sleeping whatever I can just to get some chip damage in. Like, I don't really care that much. And even if you sleep a large body and they block with a small body, you're gaining a bit of board advantage. At the end of the day, though, like, it's so situational. I just think, generally speaking, end game sleep the small targets. Early game sleep the big targets. You almost always want to rest the rated characters over rated or non-target characters over a raid target. Please keep that in mind. Like, if you raid on top of a sleep or a character that's forced to sleep, it removes that status. So you always, when deciding between two targets that are the same, but one's a raid target and one is not, you choose to sleep the non-raid target. Okay, so this is another one very specific to Yellow Kaiju. It's a bit of a discourse about whether or not Bako is usable. Now, the 3-cost Bako, unconditionally, you must play. But the 4-cost Bako is kind of weird. Historically, we've seen these cards with protection built into them. They're not that useful unless they have something else to bring to the table. A very obvious solution that we had recently was Kaoru Kamiya in Red Kenshin, the 2-cost. It is a double energy generator on 2-cost, right? So that's very efficient. The fact that it gives you protection was sort of just an added bonus. The 4-cost Bako here, though, is very meta-dependent on whether or not there's a lot of targeted abilities. So my rule of thumb is, when in doubt, you should play 1 or 2 in the back. And the front one is not as necessary as you think. It's just really useful if you go long con resource war. Otherwise, in theory, you could remove the 4-1 Bako. It would remove the number of 4K bodies you have available, though. And now the last little topic here is draw versus search. This is just very generic, but generally you always draw before you use a searcher. This is because you want to see as much as you can before making a less controlled decision, unless you're searching for something very specific that you know you can probably have a higher chance of finding. In Union Arena, all searchers bottom deck the cards that you don't take, so you really have to think about whether or not you're okay whiffing and bottom decking everything you can't search, right? So in this deck specific case, the Mina Ashiro searcher, you are looking for Mina and Bako. Are you okay with not taking a special? Are you okay with not taking Hoshina? Are you okay with missing Reno, right? You really have to be able to say, I'm fine with it now because I have no choice or because I don't need it. So again, rule of thumb, see as much as you can before committing to an action. In other words, draw before searching. And this can sometimes change your sequence pretty heavily. Sometimes you just draw a card that like completely reverses what you're doing for the turn. Okay, that's it. That is all we got for Kaiju number 8. Thank you guys for lasting this long and listening to me yap again. Feel free to always give feedback. Let me know if this helped. Let me know if it didn't, right? All of this is just so we can help you guys, the community, so Haven can help the public figure out how to play the game at a high level. So just let me know how you guys liked it, and I'll talk to you guys later.